So I presume you can hear me okay? Yep, great. So I just want to thank Gord Lutke and the association for inviting me to speak this afternoon. I'm going to take a bit of a different slant to this afternoon's presentation so far and really focus more on what Al was talking about around emergency preparedness, but this is more at the municipal level and my own experiences here, which are more largely drawn from my work with the municipality, City of Calgary for 20 years actually, and some of the experiences I've learned since then, and listening here, trying to apply it to the talks we've heard today and through the last few days, so bear with me please. So the topic of my presentation is emergency preparedness for water utilities. What can we do? Well, I'm going to start off, I'm going to cover basically 4 areas. Number 1, which now seems like a no-brainer, but it takes a while to figure these things out, is why is it even important? What can be done about it? Utility preparedness, and then a summary and wrap-up. So why is this important? Why do we need to do this? Well, as we've learned over the last little while, environment, health, and safety of community and surrounding area is incredibly important and gaining a higher priority all the time. We also have an increased focus from a regulatory perspective, and as we've noticed both here and in the US and elsewhere, there's major ramifications from a liability and financial perspective for organizations if they don't address things like spills and cleanups and so on. We can learn from past experiences, which for a lot of us involves dodging bullets. And you're looking at somebody who's seen a lot of these, and at some point you realize you can only play Russian roulette for so long. And then more to the point of why we're here around water quality and quantity, it's becoming a concern particularly in Alberta, as we know, and especially in southern Alberta as we're entering into closed basins and realizing, as Mayor Fluellen indicated, that you know what, water is now a precious resource compared to when we grew up and heard about in the 60s where it was an endless supply, and you know what, water's not an issue, you don't need to worry. That's obviously no longer the case. And the other thing is, what's the impact on our receiving stream? And this is where we start to, it hits close to home where, geez, what's the impact on our raw water conditions for our water treatment plant? And one of the things that typically happens on floods, and it's kind of nice to hear a similar story here where it's like water everywhere, but you know what, we can't really drink it because it's overwhelmed our water treatment plants. Or we have a contamination issue around this. So it really, for a lot of us, hits close to home. So, with that in context, what can we do about it? Well, one is we make sure that the managerial, technical, operational resources are available to meet a water quality or water utility concerns. So this means that somewhere along the line, somebody has to be willing perhaps to pay a price to ensure those resources are available. And I'll give you an example that I faced a number of years ago where for those of you who work in water and wastewater treatment plants, 7-day-a-week, 24-hour-a-day operations are a fact of life. But the people who perhaps go out and test source waters are not on that type of program. So they may work a 5-day week, 4-day week. They may be out every few days sampling. They may have some work elsewhere. But if you have a spill occurring at 2 o'clock in the morning, what are you going to do? Where are you going to find people to suddenly respond quickly, even in a flood situation like you had here with Red Deer, or we have faced in Calgary and some communities have faced elsewhere? Somebody has to be on call and somebody has to be prepared to respond. And those are tough decisions because they have financial ramifications, and what's the risk? And those are questions that really can only be answered perhaps at a political level, but it's something that has to be considered because you have these spills and they don't happen typically on a nice sunny day. They happen in the midst of a flood, and oftentimes, and I can't tell you how often, getting phone calls at 6 o'clock on a Friday evening, and I'm home having supper with my family and saying, you know what, Klas, we've had a sewage spill upstream of Albo. Can you get somebody out there to take a look at it? Okay. So the next thing you do is you start phoning people on call, and you have on-call lists. Somebody goes out, you're interrupting their supper, and by the time you're out there, it's 8 o'clock at night, and then they take the samples, and then they have to submit it for analysis, and then you're there, people are hanging on the phone saying, well, tell us what's the analysis? Is it contaminated? Well, you won't know until Monday because it takes 2 days to get the results. Sorry. No, we need to know now. Can't tell you that. Well, those are really tough responses when you've got the public on the line or you're potentially dealing with a boil water advisory. So it's important to keep these things in mind because they may not happen very often, but when they do, there's real serious ramifications potentially. The other thing that I've seen has not happened particularly well is find and provide measurable deliverables. In other words, when these situations happen, and Mayor Fulham, I'm sure you can relate, as so can Gord, okay, put a report to council. What happened? How did you respond? What was the cost? And how do you determine, how do you weigh it versus your day-to-day activities to make sure that it doesn't happen again? So those are things that have to be kept in mind because they happen fairly rarely. They don't happen every week or every year. Find local partners. Talked about the fire department here. This goes beyond, and I'm talking here in terms of local partners within the city municipal environment, making sure police, roads, fire, parks, recreation are all on the same page with regard to these occurrences because there's domino effects. We've had situations where we've had major fires in our city and all of a sudden we have to find rooms for people where their communities aren't livable or you're potentially evacuating people. Where are they going to go? This goes far beyond just the water utility. The other thing, and this is probably the most important, develop SitReps. What are SitReps? They're situational reports. And it's more about determining how, when, where, how, and why you do those. But those become critical, especially if it's potentially shutting down a water treatment plant, trying to decide, okay, where are we going to get our water from? So this goes into the segue into my last couple of slides, utility preparedness. Look at your in-house expertise and resources. I go back, find your local municipal partners. The SitReps, these are probably the most critical. They're typically facilitated by people from the fire department. But this is where you go through once a month, once every 2 months. Somebody needs to figure that out. You have a location where people sit down and they go through exercises in terms of, okay, we've had it, and you create it as real life as you can. So you've had a spill just upstream, major oil spill upstream of the Glenford Dam. It's going to hit our water treatment plant in 4 hours. What do we do? And the people around that room are usually the ones that come up with the solutions. It may happen in situations like this, but you go through those exercises once a month, once every 2 months. It's amazing the type of solutions that come up from those rooms, because all the people there are the ones with all the expertise, and you're doing it almost like it's real life at that point in time. Fortunately, they don't typically occur at 2 o'clock in the morning. Most of it's at 1, 2 in the afternoon on a Thursday or a Wednesday. But it's there to make sure the phone calls, phone numbers, everybody is together and knows who to contact when. And then one thing that I've noticed that hasn't typically been done all that well, but I think is important, is document and report back on the findings from those SitReps to improve time and time and time again. So you really have it down pat. So when a situation occurs, boom, you're ready to go and you know who to call. And there are courses in disaster preparedness people can take to better prepare themselves for it. So to wrap up, we know that there are risks to our water supply systems increasing with urbanization and multi-use of source waters. We're seeing that day in and day out almost. And this has been done at different levels in different communities. So it's about developing emergency preparedness plans. Some parts of municipality may be further ahead than others, but it's a work in progress, and it's about continuous improvement. And working from where you are as a baseline and just getting better and making sure you're ready. Find those partners within your utilities or your municipalities and work with them, or nonprofits or external stakeholders, whoever is impacted, make sure you have a good handle on that. And lastly, but probably most important, develop an emergency preparedness culture within your organization.